The first time Caleb Rourke saw the woman, she was standing in the middle of his yard like she had every right to be there. Snow clung to the edges of her boots, her dress hem damp from the long climb up the narrow mountain path. Behind her, the peaks rose sharp and silent, their white crowns cutting into a pale sky. In front of her stood Caleb's cabin, solid, weathered, and as unwelcoming as the man who lived inside it. He didn't step out to greet her. He stood in the doorway, broad shoulders filling the frame, arms crossed, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. "You're early," he said. The woman didn't flinch. "I was told you needed a wife," she replied. Her voice was calm. Not timid, not uncertain. That alone made something tighten in Caleb's chest. Most of them didn't sound like that. Most arrived nervous, hopeful, clutching their small bags like they were holding onto their last chance at something better. Most lasted a few days, a week if they were stubborn, then they left. Some cried, some cursed him. One had thrown a plate at his head before storming out. He didn't stop any of them, didn't want to. "I needed one," Caleb said, his tone flat, past tense. The woman tilted her head slightly, studying him. "And now I don't." A long pause stretched between them, filled only by the wind sweeping down from the mountains. She didn't move. "My name is Mara," she said after a moment. "I didn't ask." "No," she agreed, "but you should know it anyway." Caleb exhaled slowly, irritation flickering through him. "You walked all the way up here for nothing, then. Best head back before it gets dark." He expected her to argue, or plead, or at least show some sign that she understood what he was telling her. Instead, she stepped past him. Just like that, as if his words meant nothing at all. Caleb straightened, turning sharply as she entered the cabin. "What do you think you're doing, getting out of the cold?" Mara replied, setting her small bag down near the table. "You can decide the rest later." He stared at her. For a moment, he wasn't sure whether to laugh or throw her back out into the snow. "You don't understand," he said, his voice hardening. "This isn't a place for you. It never is. That's why the others leave." Mara glanced around the cabin, taking in the sparse furnishings, the cold hearth, the faint scent of wood and smoke. "They left," she said. "I haven't. Yet." She echoed, unbothered. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, his frustration growing. There was something different about her, and he didn't like it. "Suit yourself," he muttered finally. "But don't expect me to make it easy." Mara met his gaze, her eyes steady. "I don't expect anything from you," she said. That should have ended it. It should have been like all the other times. Another woman who would realize her mistake soon enough and leave him to his solitude. But as the days passed, something shifted, not all at once, not in any obvious way, but slowly, like snow melting under the first hint of spring. Mara didn't complain. That was the first thing he noticed. The cabin was cold most mornings, the fire dying out overnight. The work was hard, the mountain unforgiving. Water had to be hauled, wood chopped, food hunted or grown in stubborn patches of earth that barely yielded anything. The other women had struggled. Mara adapted. She rose early, often before Caleb, and set about whatever needed doing without waiting to be told. She learned quickly how to split wood without wasting energy, how to carry water without spilling half of it, how to move across the uneven terrain without losing her footing. Caleb watched her, always from a distance, waiting, for the moment she would falter, for the moment she would break. It didn't come. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks and the sky turned a deep shade of violet, Caleb returned from checking his traps to find her outside, kneeling near the small patch of ground he used. For planting, she was digging. The soil was frozen in places, stubborn and unyielding. "What are you doing?" he asked. She didn't look up. This could be better. It's fine as it is. It could still be better. Caleb frowned. You think you know this mountain after a few days? No, Mara said simply, but I know effort when I see wasted potential. That made him pause. You're saying I've been doing it wrong. I'm saying there's room to improve. Her tone wasn't mocking. It wasn't challenging. It was just honest. Caleb didn't know what to do with that. Do what you want, he said finally, though his voice lacked its usual edge. Mara nodded, as if that had been the expected outcome all along. That night, as they sat across from each other in the dim light of the fire, Caleb found himself studying her again. She wasn't what he had imagined when he first heard about her. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't easily discouraged. And she definitely wasn't afraid of him. That last part unsettled him the most. Why didn't you leave? He asked suddenly. She looked up from her meal, her expression calm. Because I haven't been given a reason to. He let out a short, humorless laugh. You're living with one. Mara tilted her head slightly. You're not as difficult as you think you are. Caleb stared at her. Every other woman who came here would disagree. Every other woman isn't me. There was no arrogance in her voice. Just certainty. It made something shift in his chest again. Something he didn't like. Days turned into weeks. The mountain remained harsh, the work relentless, but the cabin began to change. It wasn't obvious at first. A few small adjustments, tools placed more efficiently. The fire kept going longer into the night, the space feeling less empty. Caleb found himself returning earlier than he used to, staying closer, listening for the sound of her moving inside. He told himself it was because things were running smoother, because the work was easier with two people. He didn't question it beyond that, not at first. Then came the storm. It rolled in without warning, the sky darkening in a matter of hours. The wind picked up, howling through the mountains, carrying snow that stung like needles against the skin. Caleb had seen storms like this before. He knew what they could do. Get inside. He told Mara sharply as the first heavy gust hit. She didn't argue. They secured the cabin as best they could. Shutters fastened, door reinforced, anything loose brought inside. Then they waited. The storm raged through the night. The cabin creaked under the force of the wind, the fire struggling to stay alive. Mara sat close to it, feeding it carefully, her movements steady despite the chaos outside. Caleb watched her from across the room. "You're not scared," he said. She glanced at him. "Should I be? Most would be." Mara considered that for a moment. Fear doesn't help much in situations like this. He let out a quiet breath. No, he agreed. Another crash of thunder shook the cabin. The wind howled louder. For a moment, the world outside felt like it might tear itself apart. And yet, inside, there was a strange kind of calm. Mara shifted slightly, making room closer to the fire. "You can sit here," she said. It wasn't an invitation laced with anything more. Just a simple offer. Caleb hesitated. Then, slowly, he moved closer. The warmth hit him immediately, along with something else, something quieter, deeper. The presence of another person who wasn't leaving, who hadn't left. He sat beside her, not too close, but close enough to feel the heat of the fire reflected between them. For a while, neither of them spoke. The storm continued its fury, but it felt distant somehow. "You still think I'll leave?" Mara asked softly. Caleb stared into the fire. "I know you will," he said. "Why?" "Because everyone does." Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maybe everyone just didn't have a reason to stay." He looked at her then, really looked at her. And for the first time, the thought crossed his mind, what if she didn't leave? The idea unsettled him. Because it meant something he wasn't ready to face. Morning came with a heavy silence. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried in thick, untouched snow. Caleb stepped outside, surveying the damage. The path was gone, the land reshaped by the night's fury. Behind him, Mara emerged, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Caleb glanced back at her. "Dangerous," he corrected. She nodded. "That too." They stood there for a moment, side by side, looking out at the transformed landscape. Then Mara stepped forward, her boot sinking into the snow. "Well," she said, "we should get to work." Caleb almost smiled. Almost. The days that followed were harder. The storm had made everything more difficult: hunting, gathering, even simple movement. But they worked together, without needing to say much, without needing to argue, and somewhere along the way, Caleb realized something he hadn't expected. He was no longer waiting for her to leave. He was hoping she wouldn't. The realization hit him one evening as he returned to the cabin, the sky darkening above him. Light spilled from the window, warm, steady. He paused at the door, something unfamiliar settling in his chest. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel like a place he was surviving in. It felt like a place he was returning to. He pushed the door open. Mara looked up from where she stood by the fire. "You're late," she said. There was no accusation in her tone, just acknowledgement. "I know," he replied. She nodded, as if that was enough. As if he was enough. And in that moment, Caleb understood something he had been avoiding since the day she arrived. It wasn't the mountain that had driven the others away. It had been him, the walls he had built, the distance he had kept. Mara hadn't broken those walls. She had simply refused to walk away from them, and somehow that had made all the difference. Caleb stepped further into the room, closing the door behind him. The wind outside had quieted. Inside, the fire burned steady. And for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, like something had finally found its place. And this time he wasn't afraid of it.